I'm keeping today. I'm going to give speakers a 5-minute warning, just so you know.
Okay, so 20 minutes to explain Pew's Ending Illegal Fishing campaign. First of all, I'd just like to start by saying thank you to Google for hosting the event. Yesterday was very interesting, and the reception last night as well. Thank you very much. I think I'll probably say on behalf of everybody that's in here, so thank you very much. I'm going to try and set a precedent by, rather than talking for 20 minutes, I'm going to try and just give you the background to what we're trying to do, and then encourage some questions and debate to find out exactly where people want to go with this, and so I can learn really from feedback on what we're trying to set up at Pew. I think this audience pretty much knows Pew, but actually I'm set up in the UK. I'm in the London office. I'm the only member of Pew to be working in London on the End Illegal Fishing project. I share an office with the Global Ocean Legacy project, which is the side of Pew that looks at maritime protected areas, or as they tend to refer to it as highly protected marine reserves. And the London office is set up to look at overseas territories that the UK has. There's 14 of them. And my time in the Navy taught me to try and work out exactly how we look after our overseas territories, because when you add those territories together, it makes us the fourth biggest EEZ, or EZ, in the world. So it's quite nice to be working in an office that I can sort of bring my naval background into as well. Just to put into perspective what Pew's trying to do in their environmental side, they're working on oceans, energy and land issues, and the ocean side is the bigger part. And the bullets that are shown on the slide behind me indicate the areas where Pew are trying to work. And those of you aware of the work they're doing in tuna conservation and shark conservation, as well as the protected areas and the campaign that I direct to illegal fishing, they all fit in there somewhere. The benefit I get is I get my own bullet point, so the board are directly interested in what I'm doing, which is both good and bad, as you might be aware, because they're very focused on what we're trying to do. So the concept and vision of the campaign I direct is to try and put in place a system that will allow anybody to access the information they require to make a decision based on the information they're presented with in a credible way. So really you're looking at a port official sat in some resource poor country, sees a fishing vessel coming in, maybe with 24 hours notice, and at the moment the information that they can gather on that is sparse, patchy, probably incorrect, and it makes it very, very difficult for them to make a decision on whether they want to, 1, turn the vessel away, 2, bring it in and let it land its catch, or 3, maybe inspect it. So we try to put it in place into a system that allows them to get the information they need on that and make the decision, therefore prioritise their efforts. But actually, to get to that pinpoint moment, there's a whole set of things you've got to do before that. And again, these are slides which only give précis of the broader concept. There's a lot more behind them which you can find on our website. So the way we see it, this is what you've got to do, just the basics to get something working. First of all, you've got to identify the vessels. You'll know that vessels can change their name simply by repainting the name at the moment. There's no unique vessel identifier for fishing vessels that is mandated or universal, and it's extremely difficult for anyone to look at a vessel, decide that that's the same vessel as they saw a few weeks earlier or in a different port. And we're promoting the use of some kind of UBI. We think it's the International Maritime Organisation number, and then you need to track them. And that works both ways. It's both a mandatory tracking regulation, but of course, as we learned yesterday, people can simply turn that tracker off or manipulate it. So there's got to be some kind of system that encourages them to want to use it, and I'll come on to that later. And then the port's the single point of weakness for everybody. The fish has got to come from the point where it's caught into the market, and that comes in through a port. So if you can deal with this in the port, then actually you're making a huge difference. So we're supporting the UN FAO's Port State Measures Agreement, and the more countries that ratify that and bring it into law, the better. And the wider that's adopted, the more effective it becomes. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And then to support that, we've got to put in laws and regulations. You have to have them, but it's the harder way to do the job because you have to chase them down. I mean, the Coast Guard will probably talk about how hard it is to go find these vessels, when actually if you get them to show best practice and stand up as honest brokers, it's much easier to filter them out. information sharing is something I believe has to happen better. There's too much proprietary knowledge in the fishing world. People who retain information for their own benefit, it's not for the common benefit, and there's bits of information held by one country, but if just shared for a moment with the country next door, you'll catch someone doing something wrong and actually both benefit from protecting the resource. And then finally, of course, we need to embrace technology, and it has to be a technology that's equitably accessible to everybody. So, I knew the formatting was a bit strange. I think my UK computer doesn't like the US system page size, but almost everything is on there. We're interpreting what I've just said in this sort of size and scale. So, the Pew project is a 10-year project. We've written our strategy for the first 5 years. We've got these areas that we want to look at. As you can see by the size of the vessel, we're looking at the sort of factory-style vessel initially, the bigger factory ships. But in time, we have to roll it out beyond those sort of bigger vessels. And this is just a process. I'm going to take you onto a better slide, which will show you because it's missing off the bottom. Okay, so this captures slightly better what we're trying to achieve. So when I talk to people, most people think that this is an enforcement type campaign, and technically it is, because if you put in place the things I've just discussed, then people wanting to enforce regulations will find it much easier. But actually, once you put in place that enforcement mechanisms, then it's available for people to use under what I would call due diligence or transparency. And in the supply chain, they want to ask a question about a fish and where it's been caught. Then with a system in place that will grow out of what we're suggesting, then they can get the answers they need. So a supermarket can legitimately ask which vessel caught this fish, where did it catch it, watch the fish transit through the supply chain, make sure there's due diligence at handover at every port and every moment of sale, until eventually it arrives on the supermarket shelf. It's a big project, but people who are interested in that, people doing the traceability and transparency type work, can benefit from the work that we're doing on the enforcement side. So they feed both sides. So if we can nail the policy issues down, it helps the enforcement issues. If we can prove that enforcement works, then we can help make people make decisions on the policy side. And the example being working with the US to get the port state measures ratified. Those of you who have seen recently that the Senate has decided that ratification of the port state measures for the US is a good idea, and we're now just waiting for the President to sign off on it. That's taken like 6 years of work to explain that this is a good thing for the USA. And actually, it's through other things that the US is doing, good work by the Coast Guard, work with the memorandums of understanding with Europe, Japan, Canada, China, etc., that are showing that actually to put something in place like the Port State Measures Agreement is no bad thing. But the areas that join those two together are really that I'm interested in. And although my project isn't specifically about designing a technological solution for this, you can't step away from the fact that technology is going to be a big part of the answer. And the question is, how do you take high technology, some of the stuff that's been discussed over the last few days, and provide it to people that don't have that technology at hand? You know, not everybody carries a smartphone. It's sort of day-to-day over here, it's in Europe and other places, but when you start to go to Africa, they're working on technology that is some way behind. But I am aware of lots of people who are looking at ways to use the infrastructure there to embrace technology. So whether it's using spare bandwidth on mobile networks that exist to transfer information between more official nodes, it's a good use of that spare bandwidth. If it's a case of mechanising things in a way that a text message, an old-fashioned text message, if you can say old-fashioned with text message in the same sentence, then that might be a better way of doing it, in the same way as you might get a bank statement through on a standard phone. And this is one of the areas I'm going to talk to you about before I open up to questions. Just so you know what the other projects are under enforcement, Pew is sponsoring a project in Southeast Africa with 7 Southeast African countries. We refer to it as FishEye. The idea is that those 7 countries start to share information and are more open with each other about what they have in their fisheries. It's run for 1 year so far. It's been successful. The most significant part was a vessel, a Korean vessel, was fished in West Africa illegally in Liberian waters, went out to sea, disappeared for a wee while. came back into the Southeast African waters and was spotted by my analytical unit, who alerted the Africans to the problem. They then closed their ports to this vessel, and it tried to get into Mauritius, it tried to get into the Seychelles, it tried to get into Kenya. It was turned away resolutely by each of the countries, and in the end they had to pay the fine because they were burning fuel, trying to land their catch, their hold was full, they couldn't do any more fishing, and they had to pay the fine, which was $1 million. And actually there was a sister ship, same size and shape, another $1 million, all by people just having the strength to say no, and it was just based on the fact they shared some information. And it's a good example. That vessel has since been into port, refitted and come back out. It's no longer the Premier, it's now known as the Adrian. But nobody knows that. I didn't touch a thing there. Wow, you're busy.
Wow, busy.
Technology. Then around the outside of the board is some of the people we're working with. So we're working with the International Maritime Organisation, and we're working with the FAO. There's a big thing with the US, obviously, because PU's based in Washington and Philly, but it's growing more internationally, and obviously I'm in Europe trying to work with the Europeans on this we're doing. Trigmat is my analytical unit. This is a fisherman who's turned gamekeeper, and he's using his understanding of the fishing industry to monitor movements of fishing vessels, mainly through AIS, and recognise when a transshipment's happening or fishing activities happening, and then doing a level of analysis beyond that to find out whether they have the right licenses to do it, and then passing it on to the appropriate authorities to take action. And it was that unit that allowed the Premier to come to a point of fine. And then everyone's very interested in Interpol's project scale, set up in partnership with the Norwegians and PU. This is a project within Interpol in the hope of building on the 191 member states to share their information on networks through a law enforcement side of an effort, and bringing to light the crimes associated with illegal fishing. And that's been running a year, and they're just about to go through a 3-year project. It's growing quite nicely. Okay, so just to get to the next point. An opportunity arose in the UK to work with what's called the Catapult Satellite Application, the Satellite Applications Catapult. They've got a terrible logo. They're a government-led, UK independent centre of excellence that deals with space technology, and the idea is that they can promote the use of space technology within the UK in order to access the vast amounts of money that people can make by working in space. And they asked me to present on the project and give them a problem, so I did. And over the last year, between PU, Exact Earth, who are a global AIS provider, and Trigmat, the analytical unit I told you about, we've started to automate the system that basically Trigmat has been doing over the past 3 or 4 years. And the idea is we take a global picture from global AIS, all those dots you can see on the screen, that's a snapshot, 1 second snapshot of what's going on around the world, and then try and put them in order. So we're working on historical data at the moment off of West Africa, and if you sort of zoom in to West Africa, again it's a very quick presentation, then you can start to see alerts based on those vessels. Analyzers have been doing work on algorithms that allow you to recognise fishing activity, whether it be slowing down, to transship, or conducting longline activity, or entering a port of interest, or crossing a border. These things exist, but we're trying to design learning algorithms that as the analyst goes through and says, no, that's not fishing activity, but that is, the computer learns and therefore gives you more accurate information next time. And it sets up in a nice way AIS. So on this one, this is like AIS has just been turned off. There's an action we're interested in. Why would you want to turn off a safety of life at sea device? So it hones us in. Similarly, if you turn it on again. And we're trying to build around that. We do the same with transshipment, crossing lines, etc. There's a huge database owned by Trigmat that he's built up over years that shows the flag changes, ownership changes, name changes, call sign changes of as many fishing vessels as he can get his hands on. And that's now linked in to the Exact Earth AIS data. So as you draw up the track, you get a history behind it as well. It's temporal, so you can either look at it now, live, or you can drag a slider and go back in history and everything moves with it. So if you find a vessel conducting something a bit unusual, you can slide that vessel back in time to see how much more unusual stuff it's done in the past few months. The database presents in a sort of nice way. It's a, you might have drop-down menu, and it's fast. This is like very quick information. They're using similar sizes computers to what Google have available to them, and it's pretty quick information. And from my background in the Navy, it's pretty much like a ship's ops room, and you can work it quite well, but it's not live yet. And we've got the best technicians we can working on it, and they're trying to present it in a game way, using the sort of youth concept of if it's easily accessible, you can draw your right weapon in whatever game you're playing. It's the same sort of thing on this. You want to get to information really quickly. So we've started to play with the most appropriate way. You can see down the right-hand side, you set your filters how you like it, your personal taste for how things want to be presented. There's a timeline that you can draw up. There's a global map that shows the bigger map, etc., etc. And effectively, there's no limits to what you want to do with this. And it's pretty much as Google were describing yesterday. At the moment, you've just got a straightforward map view. But if you want to put a chart on there and see bathymetric data, or you can put on weather data, or you can put on the sort of fish prediction tools. And from my point of view as a Navy officer, what I do is I basically colour in great chunks of the earth, or the water, that fishing vessels won't be, and reduce the areas where you need to look, and therefore you can start to prioritise. And it goes on and on and on. So this is why I wanted to whistle through it. I've done none of it justice, but I just want to give you a chance to sort of see where we're taking it. And then, when you talk to people like SkyTruth, Analyze, the Space Quest, lots of people have been sort of helping us design this in a way that it's usable, but it needs to be equitable. That's the key. What I'm not trying to set up is a way to make money and promote fishing as a profit-making industry. It's about providing this information to those people who need it most. So, if Palau can draw from this in order to see what's in their areas, or what's not in their areas, or watch stuff that's coming over the horizon and see it change its course, then they can maybe project their UAV or unmanned surface vehicle to that spot to do something about it, or share under your agreements with the other states. And this is what we're trying to do. So we're going live on this now. Over the next 6 months, the very initial bit will be done, and then we're going to build in other stuff like SAR radar, crowdsourcing information. We can hand it off to the Coast Guard, the Royal Navy, whoever else wants it. So, questions? Great. So, we'll go in just behind. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. And then in front.
Yeah. How old is the data? If someone goes to your website, can anyone access it? And how old is the data?
So, we're building a model that will do two things. There's an enforcement side, which is going to be closed, covered, protected, because you have to do that in order to deal with the right agencies. And they're trusted sources. So that side of it won't be open. It'll be under contract for those people who want to take it. So those fish eye nations I talked about, they will get this information in a box, and that's it. But we believe you can take that information and then redact it and hide the source, and then move it over to an open side, and through a methodology of saying there's 7 ticks for headwindness. If you've got 7 green ticks against your vessel, you can trust the source fully. If there's only 1 tick, then there's obviously not much data. If there's red crosses, it's bad. A very basic model like that can come out onto an open side. And that side is the side of the model which we believe supply chains will be interested in, insurance brokers can sort of monitor, you can use that for data collection, university studies, etc., etc. And we think on that side, there's a certain amount of it can be made live, but some of it you want to put a lapse on because you don't want the fishermen themselves to be able to see that you're tracking them, because they can take action to avoid. Depends how you look at it. Is it deterrence, i.e. behaving better because they know you're being looked at, or they can take activity away. So on that side, we're waiting for the partners that will come in at the next stage to decide the most appropriate way to do it. So just behind you.
So I'm just wondering about your thoughts on the capacity of the international institutions that might be sharing this data. You talked about needing ways to share it. I know Interpol is out there. I just wonder if you thought about how much capacity is needed there and how to deal with that problem.
So Interpol are obviously very independent, and they will set up their own Interpol In fact, they have just set up. It's called Fishing Tel. It launched last month. And they, within Interpol, will now build in Interpol's way the intelligence they have on activity that's linked to fishing vessels, and they can share that through their secure network. But this more open system can feed into it. So if it goes in, if you see it going as information, Interpol then collaborate it and check it and turn it into intelligence, basically. But once it's crossed the line into Interpol, we'll never see it back out again. So it's good to have something on the open side as well. And that's pretty much where we are with that at the moment. We've got that transaction working, TrigMap already worked with Interpol, and we're waiting to see how the information builds their database.
For the effort that you had, the iFish in Southeast Africa, are you working with the Indian Ocean Commission at all?
Yeah, so we're doing all that in partnership with the Indian Ocean Commission, IOTC as well, NEPAD, and most of the sort of African development regimes. And it's at the right level, it's a high political level, so we're hopefully building sustainability and some kind of longevity to it. It's not just because someone's putting some money, time and effort into it. We're hoping that they'll see that there's a revenue exchange here, that if they can keep it going, then it's good. And they've been out and advocated for this in different areas. They were in the Caribbean recently. They did it, the Monitoring Control and Surveillance Network workshop over in Costa Rica. And people warm to the idea because it's just basic information sharing. It's what everybody does at the basic level where they say, look, I know we shouldn't be talking because the bosses don't get on, but here's what we know, and all of a sudden things work better and the bosses are happy and have no idea. The information is shared. What we're trying to do is just bring it up to the level and go, this information is being shared. Now do it for the common good and make it official. That's what we're trying to do. Is that the end? Yeah. Wow.
More discussion. Next, I want to welcome Sabine Jessen, who is National Oceans